I'm a signal operator on the Trans-Siberian line. The midnight dispatch has rules. My name is Vanya Volkov, and I operate Junction 73 alone. I should clarify what alone means out here. The nearest settlement is Nerchinsk, 240 kilometers west. The nearest living human being, a forestry surveyor named Dmitry, works from a cabin roughly 100 kilometers south, though I've never met him. We share a radio frequency for emergencies. He has never called me. I have never called him. Junction 73 is not a station in any traditional sense. There is no platform, no passenger service, no cafe selling weak coffee and stale pastries. It is a concrete bunker half buried in permafrost, designed in 1967 to house the equipment needed to manually override track switches for freight traffic on a secondary spur of the Trans-Siberian network. The main room contains one control panel, one radar screen, one radio transceiver, one desk, one chair, one cot, and one window, small triple-paned, facing north toward the tracks. I have been here for 8 days. The man I replaced, his name was Kaspar, according to the personnel file, left no formal handover documentation. This is unusual but not unprecedented in remote postings. What I found instead was a hand-drawn map of the junction taped to the wall above the control panel, covered in annotations written in tight Cyrillic script, different colored pens, some notes crossed out and rewritten, arrows pointing to specific track segments. Attached to the map with a rusted paperclip was a single typewritten sheet, yellowed at the edges, titled Protocol Polunoknoi Dispetcherizacji Nestandardny Traffic, Midnight Dispatch Protocol, Non-Standard Traffic. I read it the first night and assumed it was a joke, some kind of hazing ritual for the new operator. The list contained 8 rules, numbered but not explained, referring to something called the cargo gruz. The language was procedural, clinical, like a technical manual, but the content was absurd. I folded the paper and placed it in the desk drawer. On my 3rd night at Junction 73, the radar screen showed an unscheduled contact approaching from the east at 22:47. I checked the log. No freight was scheduled through this junction for another 6 days. I radioed the regional dispatch center in Chita to report the anomaly. The line crackled. A woman's voice, distant and uninterested. Junction 73, contact is registered. Designated non-standard freight. Follow posted protocol. I don't have a protocol for unscheduled. Check your station documentation. Midnight dispatch protocol. Acknowledge. I felt something cold move through my chest. Acknowledged. The line went dead. I opened the desk drawer and unfolded the typewritten sheet. The protocol summarized Rule 1. Timing. The cargo will pass through Junction 73 between 23 and 3. Do not attempt to delay or reroute outside this window. Do not request clarification on its origin or destination. Rule 2. The approach track. When radar indicates the cargo is within 5 kilometers, manually switch the junction to line B, the eastern spur. Listen carefully to the switch mechanism. If the grinding sound is too smooth, as if the rails are not resisting, immediately revert to line A and activate the emergency siren. Do not wait for visual confirmation. Rule 3. The cargo count. As the cargo passes, count the number of carriages. The correct count is 27. If the count is any other number, immediately transmit. Load manifest is incomplete. Halt and verify. Do not wait for a response. Do not repeat the transmission. Rule 4. Locomotive observation. Do not look directly at the locomotive. If you accidentally see it, do not attempt to identify the engine number, model, or any markings. If you remember any identifying details after it has passed, write them down and burn the paper immediately. Rule 5. The reflection. During the cargo's passage, use only the green emergency lantern for light. Place it on the floor. Position yourself so your reflection is not visible in the window glass. If you see your reflection, cover your head with both hands, and recite the Russian alphabet backwards until the tracks are silent. Rule 6. Do not exit. Under no circumstances leave the control room while the cargo is within 10 kilometers of the junction. The external door will unlock automatically once the tracks are clear. Rule 7. Sound discipline. Do not speak, hum, or make any unnecessary noise while the cargo is passing. Do not play music. Do not tap your fingers. The microphone on the radio transceiver is always active during non-standard traffic. Rule 8. The final transmission. After the cargo has cleared the junction and the time reaches 3, the main radio will emit a brief recording of a person coughing. Log this as signal check. Successful. Do not attempt to identify the speaker. Do not acknowledge the sound as human. If you respond verbally to the cough, the radio will transmit your coordinates. At 22:58, I switched off the overhead fluorescent lights and retrieved the emergency lantern from the supply cabinet. It was older than I expected, a Soviet-era camping lantern with a dented green metal casing and a cracked glass panel. I turned the dial. The light was dim, sickly, casting everything in a greenish pallor. I placed it on the floor near the desk, away from the window. The radar contact was now 7 kilometers out, moving at approximately 30 kilometers per hour. Abnormally slow for freight traffic. I checked the manual switch controls. Line B had not been used in years, according to the maintenance log. The last recorded switch activation was 3 months ago. By Kaspar, at 23:04, the radar showed 5 kilometers. I pulled the mechanical lever for line B. The sound that came from beneath the floor was not mechanical. Or rather, it was mechanical, but wrong. Metal grinding against metal, but with a stuttering, uneven rhythm, like the rails were reluctant to move. I heard the distant clunk of the switch engaging, and then silence, not smooth, grinding, resistant. I exhaled. My hands were shaking. At 23:11 I heard it, not the train itself, the displacement of air ahead of it. A low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the concrete walls, through the floor, through my sternum. I have worked around trains my entire adult life. I know the sound of an approaching locomotive. This was different, deeper, older. I moved to the window, then stopped. Do not look directly at the locomotive. I positioned myself at an angle, standing beside the window, rather than in front of it, where I could see the tracks, but not my own reflection in the glass. The green lantern on the floor cast my shadow long and distorted across the wall. The hum grew louder, and then I saw it. The locomotive passed first, a dark, hulking shape that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. I kept my eyes unfocused, deliberately blurring my vision. I did not see details. I did not see markings. I saw only mass and movement, a geometry of iron that felt wrong, as if it occupied more space than it should. It took 11 seconds for the locomotive to pass the window. Then came the carriages. I began counting. 1, 2, 3. They were uniform, identical. Windowless freight containers painted a color I could not name in the dim light, something between rust brown and dark green. Each carriage had a single stripe of faded Cyrillic text along the side, too filthy to read. 8, 9, 10. The sound was hypnotic. The rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels on the rails, perfectly spaced, perfectly timed. I found myself breathing in sync with it. 15, 16. I noticed something. The carriages had no gaps between them, no couplings. It was as if the entire train were a single segmented organism, bending smoothly around the curve of the track. 20, 21. My mouth was dry. I kept counting. 25, 26. The 27th carriage passed the window. I waited. No 28th. The end of the train appeared. A flat, blank rear panel with no lights, no markings, no indication that anything had ever been attached to it. 27. Correct. I did not transmit anything. I stood in the green light, listening as the sound of the wheels faded into the distance, heading west along Line B toward the abandoned mining territories. At 23:34, the radar showed the contact moving away. I allowed myself to breathe properly. I did not move toward the door. Rule 6. Do not exit until the tracks are clear. I sat in the chair and waited. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no animal sounds. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the faint ringing in your ears. At 1:15 I made a mistake. I glanced at the window to check the tracks, and I saw my reflection. It was faint, just a ghost of a face in the dark glass, illuminated by the green lantern, but it was unmistakably me. My eyes, my jaw, my expression of exhausted vigilance. The protocol was explicit. If you see your reflection, cover your head with both hands and recite the Russian alphabet backwards until the tracks are silent. I have a university education. I have read Tolstoy and Chekhov and Bulgakov. I do not believe in curses or superstitions, but I also did not want to find out what happens when you ignore the rules in a place like this. I placed both hands over my head, fingers interlaced, and closed my eyes. Aya, I-U-E-Y. Shh, shh. E-F-U-T-S-R-P-O-N-M-L-K-I-I-Z Z-I-O-E-D-G-V-B-A. I recited it 3 times, slowly, carefully, making sure not to skip a letter. My voice sounded strange in the silence, too loud, too human. When I finished, I lowered my hands and opened my eyes. The reflection was gone. Not because I had moved. The angle was the same. The lantern was in the same position, but the glass now showed only darkness and the faint outline of the tracks outside. No face, no eyes, as if I had never been there at all. The cargo passed through Junction 73 4 more times over the next 6 days, always between 23 and 3, always unscheduled, always announced by the radar contact and the dead, bureaucratic voice from Chita, follow posted protocol. I followed the protocol. On the second passage, the switch to line B made a sound like tearing metal. I nearly reverted to line A, but the sound was grinding, not smooth, reluctant. I let it engage. On the third passage, I counted 26 carriages. I immediately transmitted, "Load manifest is incomplete. Halt and verify." There was no response. The train did not stop. It continued west at the same slow, inexorable pace. I did not repeat the transmission. The protocol was clear. I logged a discrepancy in the station ledger. Non-standard freight, 26 carriages observed. Notification transmitted per protocol. On the fourth passage, I made the mistake of looking directly at the locomotive. It was not intentional. I was adjusting the lantern and my eyes caught the shape of the engine as it passed. Just a glimpse, less than 2 seconds, but enough to see details. The locomotive had no number. The panel where the engine identification should have been displayed was blank. Not removed, not painted over. Simply absent, as if it had never existed. And there was something else. A symbol, stenciled in white paint on the side of the engine, just below the window of the driver's cabin. A circle with 3 lines radiating from the center. Not a hazard symbol, not a railway marking. Something older. I forced my eyes away. For the rest of that night, I could not stop thinking about the symbol. It was burned into my vision, a white afterimage that appeared every time I blinked. At 2:47, I found myself drawing it on a piece of scrap paper without realizing I was doing it. The protocol was explicit. If you remember any identifying details after it has passed, write them down and burn the paper immediately. I held the paper over the lantern flame until it blackened and curled. The symbol disappeared into ash. I felt better after that, as if I had excised something from my mind. On the 5th passage, nothing unusual happened. 27 carriages. No reflection. The switch engaged with the proper grinding reluctance. I followed every rule precisely. At 3, the radio emitted the final transmission, a cough, dry, brief, unmistakably human. The sound of someone clearing their throat followed by silence. I logged it as instructed, signal check, successful. I did not speak. I did not acknowledge it, but I made another mistake. I wondered, just for a moment, who had made that sound. Was it a recording? Was it live? Was someone listening on the other end of the frequency, waiting to hear if I would respond? The thought stayed with me long after the radio went silent. On the 8th day, I found the old logbooks. They were stored in a metal cabinet beneath the radio transceiver, behind a stack of outdated technical manuals. 7 logbooks, each covering a 6-month period, dating back 3 years. I opened the most recent one. Kaspar's handwriting was small and precise, each entry logged with bureaucratic efficiency. Most entries were routine, freight schedules, maintenance notes, weather observations. But scattered throughout were entries marked MDP, Midnight Dispatch Protocol. 12 March, MDP, 27 carriages, no deviation. 19 March, MDP, 27 carriages, switch sound anomalous but within acceptable parameters. 03 April, MDP, 28 carriages, notification transmitted, no response. Train did not stop, 28 carriages. I flipped back further, January, December, November. The entries became less frequent, but more detailed. 17 November, MDP, violation of Rule 5, reflection observed. Protocol followed, no immediate consequences noted. 22 November, MDP, 27 carriages, routine passage. 29 November, MDP, 26 carriages, notification transmitted, external door remained locked until 4:17. No explanation. I turned to the final entry in Kaspar's log, dated 2 weeks before I arrived, 14 October, MDP, 27 carriages, followed all protocols. At 3, radio transmission received as expected, made verbal acknowledgement in error, coordinates transmitted in return, unable to identify recipient or purpose, door mechanism unresponsive, requesting immediate relief and transfer. There were no entries after that. I sat very still, the logbook open on my lap. Kaspar had broken Rule 8. He had responded to the cough, and the radio had transmitted his coordinates back. To whom? To what? I checked the personnel file again. Kaspar's transfer request had been approved. He had left Junction 73 1 week before my arrival. The file listed his forwarding address as Cheetah, care of the Regional Railway Administration. I picked up the radio and switched to the general frequency. Junction 73 to Cheetah Dispatch. Request personnel information for former operator Kaspar Ilian. Over. Static. Cheetah Dispatch, do you copy? Over. More static. And then a voice, not the woman from before, but an older man, bored and irritated. Junction 73. Personnel records are not accessible via radio. Submit a written request through the standard channels. Over. This is urgent. I need to confirm his current post. Operator, you are violating radio protocol. Personnel matters are not urgent. Submit in writing. Cheetah Dispatch out. The line went dead. I sat in the chair staring at the radio. I thought about Kaspar's final entry, requesting immediate relief and transfer. I thought about the locked door, the transmitted coordinates. I thought about the fact that I had never heard another train on Line B. Not in 8 days. Not once. Only the cargo, moving west into the abandoned territories. Where did it go? What was it carrying? And why did the protocol exist? And the cargo returned 3 nights later. I was ready. I had memorized every rule, every detail. I would not make Kaspar's mistake. At 22:58, I switched to the Green Lantern. At 23:04, I engaged Line B. The switch ground and clunked with appropriate resistance. At 23:09, I heard the hum. This time, I did not look at the locomotive. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the green circle of light cast by the lantern, until the sound of the engine had passed. Then I began counting carriages. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm was the same, the hypnotic clack-clack of wheels on rails. 10, 11, 12. I kept my position carefully calibrated, able to see the tracks, unable to see my reflection. 18. 19. The 20th carriage was different. Not visibly. It looked identical to the others. Same color, same dimensions, same faded Cyrillic text along the side. But as it passed, I heard something. A voice. Faint. Muffled. Coming from inside the carriage, singing. I froze, my count disrupted. The voice was thin, distant, like someone singing in another room with the door closed. I could not make out the words, but the melody was unmistakably human. A woman's voice, singing something slow and mournful. The carriage moved past. The singing faded. I resumed counting, my heart hammering. 21, 22, 23. The 24th carriage also had a voice. A man's voice this time, speaking rapidly in Russian, the words too quick and overlapping to understand. Not singing. Explaining something. Desperate. Pleading. 25, 26, 27. Silence. The train passed. The radar confirmed the contact moving away. I stood in the green light, breathing hard. The protocol said nothing about voices. At 1:30, I went back to the logbooks. I checked every entry marked MDP. None of them mentioned sounds coming from inside the carriages. No singing, no voices. Either Kaspar had never heard them, or he had chosen not to document them. I considered writing it in the log. But what would I write? Heard voices inside carriages during MDP. No protocol exists for this phenomenon. No action taken. It felt dangerous to acknowledge it, as if writing it down would make it real. I closed the logbook and returned it to the cabinet. At 3, the radio emitted the cough. I logged it as signal check. Successful. I did not speak. I did not wonder. I did not think about who was listening. But that night I dreamed. I dreamed I was standing on the tracks outside Junction 73. In the snow, under a sky with no stars. The cargo was approaching, but it was not moving. It was growing. Stretching toward me. The carriages multiplying, endless. 27 becoming 50, becoming 100, becoming infinite. And every carriage had a door, and every door was opening. I woke at 6, drenched in cold sweat. I began to suspect the purpose of the protocol, not to protect me, not to ensure the safe passage of the cargo, to ensure the cargo did not stop. Every rule was designed to create conditions that allowed the train to continue its journey west, into the empty territories, without interference. The switch to line B, the count, the silence, even the reflection rule, covering my head, reciting the alphabet backwards, was a distraction, a way to ensure I was not watching the tracks, not observing anything I should not observe. The protocol was not a safety procedure, it was a containment procedure, and I was not an operator, I was a component, a mechanical part of the system, ensuring the train moved through the junction without stopping, without deviating, without any human interference beyond the minimum necessary to guide it along the correct tracks. The final transmission, the cough, was a test, a confirmation that the operator was still present, still following orders, still functional. And if the operator broke protocol, if they responded to the cough, acknowledging it as human, the radio transmitted their coordinates, so something could find them. I thought about Kaspar, his transfer request, his departure 1 week before I arrived. I thought about Line B, the unused spur, heading west into territories that had been evacuated in the 1950s, where no freight was scheduled, where no settlements existed. Where did the cargo go? And what happened to operators who broke the rules? On my 15th night at Junction 73, the cargo arrived early. The radar contact appeared at 22:14, still more than 40 minutes before the protocol window. I radioed Cheetah immediately. Junction 73 to dispatch. Non-standard freight contact detected outside protocol window. Request clarification. Over. Static. Cheetah dispatch. Please respond. Contact is inbound. ETA 18 minutes. I do not have authorization to engage outside the window. Over. The line crackled. The woman's voice, the same one from my first night, calm and distant. Junction 73. Adjust protocol window. New parameters 22 to 3. Acknowledge. This wasn't in the documentation. Operator, you are expected to follow updated protocols as transmitted. Do you acknowledge? I felt something cold and sharp move through my chest. Acknowledged. Follow posted protocol. Cheetah out. The line went dead. I stared at the radar screen. The contact was now 8 kilometers out. I had 6 minutes. I switched off the overhead lights, retrieved the green lantern, placed it on the floor. At 22:31, the contact reached 5 kilometers. I pulled the lever for line B. The grinding sound was wrong. Not just rough, not just reluctant. Smooth. Too smooth. As if the rails were offering no resistance at all. As if the switch were engaging without friction, without weight, without the physical reality of metal on metal. Rule 2 was explicit. If the grinding sound is too smooth, immediately revert to line A and activate the emergency siren. My hand hovered over the lever. The radar showed 4 kilometers. 3 minutes. I thought about Kaspar. I thought about the voices in the carriages. I thought about the transmitted coordinates. I pulled the lever back to line A. I hit the emergency siren. The sound was deafening in the small concrete room. A mechanical wail that rose and fell, piercing, relentless. I had never heard it before. It sounded like something dying. The radar contact stopped, not slowed, stopped at exactly 3 kilometers from the junction. The cargo came to a complete halt. I watched the radar screen, my pulse thundering in my ears. The siren continued to wail. 30 seconds passed. 1 minute. The contact began moving again, but not forward. Backward. I watched, frozen, as the cargo reversed course, moving east, back along the tracks it had come from, accelerating slowly until it disappeared from the radar screen entirely. At 22:41, the siren automatically shut off. The silence was absolute. I stood in the green light, staring at the empty radar screen, trying to understand what I had just done. I had diverted the cargo. I had prevented it from passing through the junction, and the protocol did not tell me what happened next. At 3, the radio emitted the cough, but it was different, longer, wetter. The sound of someone coughing violently, unable to stop, choking on something in their throat. It went on for 11 seconds. Then silence. I did not log it as signal check, successful. I did not log it at all. At 3:17, the external door unlocked with its usual mechanical click. I considered leaving, going outside, walking the tracks to confirm the cargo was truly gone. But I did not move. At 4, I heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, methodical, boots on frozen ground. I turned off the lantern and sat in total darkness, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped directly outside the control room. A pause, then, a voice, muffled by the door but unmistakable. Kaspar's voice. Vanya, let me in. It's cold out here. I did not respond. I did not move. I know you're listening. I know you followed the protocol. You did the right thing. Let me in. I can explain everything. His voice sounded tired. Reasonable. Human. I was you, Vanya. I sat in that chair. I counted the carriages. I learned the rules. And now I understand. The cargo isn't dangerous. The protocol isn't containment, it's selection. Do you understand? It's choosing who gets to leave. Who gets to stop being an operator and become something else. I pressed my hands over my ears. You diverted it, Vanya. That means you're aware. That means you're questioning. That's the first step. Let me in. I'll show you what happens next. I'll show you where line B really goes. The footsteps resumed, circling the bunker, testing the window, testing the door. You'll understand eventually. Everyone does. Kaspar understood. The operator before him understood. There have been 37 operators at Junction 73, Vanya. Do you know how many retired, how many transferred, how many requested relief and actually received it? I kept my hands over my ears, my eyes closed. None, Vanya. None of them left. Because Line B doesn't just carry the cargo, it carries operators. It carries anyone who breaks the rules or follows them too well or asks the wrong questions. It carries them west into the empty territories where the train never stops and the protocol never ends. The footsteps stopped at the door again. I'll come back tomorrow night, and the night after that, and eventually you'll open the door, because you're alone out here, Vanya. Alone except for the rules. And the rules don't love you. They don't care if you're cold or tired or frightened. They just need you to function. Silence. I waited in the darkness until dawn. When I finally moved, my joints were stiff, my hands numb. I checked the external door. Locked. I checked the window. The tracks were empty. No footprints in the snow. I checked the radar. No contacts. I opened the logbook and turned to a fresh page. I wrote, 15 November, MDP protocol deviation. Emergency siren activated per Rule 2. Cargo diverted. Post-protocol anomaly. External contact. Possible psychological event. No physical evidence. Continuing standard operations. I read it 3 times. Then I tore out the page and burned it over the green lantern flame. I would follow the protocol. I would not question. I would count to 27, and I would not speak, and I would not look at my reflection, and I would log the cough as a successful signal check, and I would never, ever open the door. Because I understand now. The protocol isn't here to protect me from the cargo. It's here to protect the cargo from me, from the questions I might ask, from the rules I might break, from the possibility that I might realize what Junction 73 really is, not a railway station, a filter, and I am not an operator. I am a test, and I have failed.